Good morning. So I want to start off by just asking you all, how many have really thought about how you see food in TV programs? Has anybody ever looked at TV programs and sort of looked at the food? Some of you have, and thought about, okay, that's interesting, or maybe that's a little strange, or maybe even a little bit inappropriate. Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to focus primarily on the area of tweens, and I'll explain what a tween is in a minute for those of you who may not know. So first of all, this is an article that recently published in January of this year in the Journal of Nutrition and Education and Behavior. And it was an interesting project that started with a communication major at the University of Kentucky who was doing her graduate work. And she came to me and she says, "Oh, I'm so good at communication, but I really need a dietitian." And so we love, dietitians love to be helped. Or be helpers. And so we started down this journey, and now Morgan is an assistant professor at the University of San Diego. So it's always great to see our grad students go on to bigger things. And then along with Morgan and her original idea for her master's thesis, I used a colleague also at the University of Kentucky, Tammy Stevenson, who helped me with this project. So first of all, I want to start off with let's look at about TV a little bit in terms of advertising, because often people think of food and TV as really advertisements. And we start thinking about advertisements on Super Bowl day, don't we? I mean, that's how it begins, first of the year, advertising. So what we see is there's a lot of exposure of food advertisement, and actually, for children, they see 11 to 13 food advertisements a day, and the majority of those foods are high in fat, sodium, and sugar. We also know that advertising in children, there was a study that was done that looked at the entire year of 2008, and they saw within that year that children were exposed to, through advertising, 35,000 different foods. And most of those were in the areas of soft drinks, energy drinks, and even restaurant companies. So we do know that there have, from studies, shown that there is an influence in behavior and consumption of snacks, sugar-sweetened beverages, and fast food based on food advertising. So I'm going to change it just a little bit now, and let's talk about TV programming. And so really, as Dr. Bissell mentioned a little while ago, children do spend a lot of time watching TV, as we all know. And so there was a study that looked at just in the year 2005 versus 2010, and they saw that even in that 5-year period, children were watching 40 minutes more a day of TV. And so what we do see is also that that children's viewing of media has changed, and I'll speak a little bit more to that. But if you think about it, they just don't watch TV off of a TV anymore, like some of us in the room learned to do. They're seeing it off the internet, off their laptops, off their iPads, off their iPhones. So there's so many other media ways that children are watching TV. So when we look at the research, we found that it was really sparse in the area of how much food is referenced in TV programming. And there really were only 7 studies that had been done, and they were dated, many of them. In fact, only 2 studies have been published in the last decade before our study this year that looked at food in TV programs. And so what we see that more than half of the food references were usually non-nutritious foods. And only one of those studies, which was in the last decade, actually in 2009, looked at children and TV programming. And what these studies have found is that the average number of times that food is referenced in a study, in a TV program, ranged from 4.8 times per hour to 17 times per hour. And what generally happened in the children's programming is that the food was 2 times more likely to be an unhealthy food, or what we might call non-nutritious, than it was considered to be a healthy food. So our objective of our study was to examine food references in television programming targeting the 11 to 14-year-old range. I have done a lot of research on tweens. I love tweens because tweens is a very interesting age. And sometimes you'll see it be listed as 10 to 14 or 11 to 15, but that's a really interesting age, and I remember my own children at that age. They are really suddenly becoming very independent, making their own choices, but then they're going to school where they maybe even have choices of what they get to choose on the cafeteria line. And so it's really a time of coming out and saying, I like to eat this or I don't like to eat that, and being very vocal and independent in the choices they make. And so that was the target of who we wanted to look at with regard to our research. And what we saw about tweens is in terms of their TV behavior, they average 5 hours per day. And Dr. Bissell mentioned that a little bit earlier. But what's also interesting is you watch about where is the TV? Well, I certainly didn't have a TV in my bedroom, I'll tell you that. But kids today do. And so an 8 to 10-year-old, 56% have a TV in their bedroom, but by the time they're 11 to 18, that jumps to 76%. And the other interesting thing about tweens, as we would suspect, is they generally don't have adult supervision while they're watching TV. So we have to think about that. And as I mentioned, TV to them extends beyond that TV in their bedroom. They take that TV with them because they have it on their iPhone, they have it on their iPad. They're doing all kinds of ways to access a TV program. Some other things that we need to think about of why it's important about food and TV is the whole connection of modeling and how children look at who they model and aspire to be like. And studies have found that you can, through characters in TV programs, establish an enthusiastic behavior in that child towards someone. And I will tell you that one of the TV programs that we looked at is Hannah Montana. Now, who is Hannah Montana, everyone? Miley Cyrus, you know? So that is part of our study. She is included in that, her show. And so there is that relationship that tweens start establishing to the characters in the show. And, of course, if they're famous. And second, are they similar in age or are they a little bit older in age? And those are all important factors to children of whether they are then going to model that behavior in the choices they make or the food preferences they have based on that. The other, now going to switch gears and just tell you a little bit about our study. I sort of laid out the format of why we went into this study and why we believed it was so important. So in our study, we looked at 6 television programs that target specifically tweens. And in those programs, what we did is we took 880 hours worth, which was actually 5 weekdays, Monday through Friday, and we did what's called afternoon and early evening. Very appropriate times for tweens to be watching TV. It's a real peak time for them. And what we did in that time period is, in those 20 hours, we then went back and excluded any commercials or any opening and ending credits that are given. So it was purely TV programming that we looked at. We used the Disney Channel. Why the Disney Channel? Does anyone know? It is the #1 channel for this age group and has been for many, many years. So we went to the channel that is most popular with this audience. And if you think about it also, cable TV itself is available in 99 million U.S. homes today. So we definitely have children watching the Disney Channel in this age group. So what we did in terms of our study methods is we analyzed the scenes where food was used, and then we also looked at it and compared it to the USDA MyPlate. And then our last analysis was we analyzed it according to the modified Scheitz and Daniels ratio of recommended to restricted food components, the RRR. There's not a lot of opportunities in the literature of other ways that food has been analyzed. We believe the RRR was the best factor that's out there today to use for this type of study. And so let's start off with MyPlate. So, little refresher on MyPlate. As you know, it has 6 groups: the fruits, the vegetables, the grains, protein foods, dairy, and oils. And so we took each of those 880 foods and we identified where they fell in the MyPlate. So what did we do about foods like a hamburger? Because a hamburger has meat patty and a bun. They went into a combination where we broke it down as best we could in our nutrition analysis. Then there were the other foods that are not addressed on MyPlate, and those included the chips, the cookies, the candy, the soft drinks, the water, the coffee, etc. all went into our other. So of our 880 foods, each one of them ended up in one of those categories for the analysis against MyPlate. Then if you look at the RRR, you'll see it was a long formula to fit up there, but it is based on the daily values recommended through our U.S. dietary guidelines, the 2010 guidelines. So the daily value for protein, fiber, calories, I can't even read that, iron, vitamin A, and vitamin C. And those are looked at, those are recommended daily values. And we also used underneath that, the formula looks at calories, sugar, cholesterol, saturated fat, and sodium, the restricted nutrients. And so when the formula was first developed, the RRI, Scheidt and Daniels interpreted it as being that if a food is 1 or greater in its score, it is a nutritious, healthy food. And if it's 0.99 or less, it is not as nutritious or not as healthy. Well, as we got into it, we looked at it and we found that really food using this formula has a lot of variability. For example, spinach is 278, obviously very healthy. And that's spinach with nothing on it, okay? But then if you look at a piece of candy, we saw as low of numbers as 0.0005. So very, very huge range. So we modified, this is something that's new to the literature, is that we actually modified our RRR so that, as you see in red, there are 4 additional categories for the non-nutritious foods or the less healthy foods. And that was to actually show, and I'll show you in a minute the data why that was important to do that. So first of all, we wanted to know, well, why are these foods even shown on TV? Why are they in TV programs? Well, most often they were for fairly good reasons, physiological reasons, like you need to eat, good for the body. But then they're also used for such things as parties and special events and all kinds of things that you can think of are reasons why we eat food. So that was looked at. Then we looked at also meal types. Well, are they used for certain meal types? So interesting, as you can imagine, if you look up here, you'll see that our number 1 is for snacks. Almost 41% of the time on TV, it is in reference to a snack. And sadly, you see sort of a dropping downward. And look at breakfast. And all the research that's been done on breakfast and how important breakfast is for starting the day off healthy and nutritious. And look how little it gets accounted for in TV programming targeting tweens. Oh, by the way, I do want to also mention, I just noticed I had not brought up this number 331. Those are food-related scenes, not food specifically. So a food-related scene can have multiple foods in it, okay? So that was every time a food was mentioned, shown, or consumed, okay? Then as we move on, we see that there is the visual area was really the number one reason why that a food was in a program. And so visually it was about 53%, followed by verbal, and then last was the consumption of the food at 10. And then we had the combinations where you could be talking about it, consuming it, talking about it, and looking at it, etc. So you see a combination that went on with the foods. Now we really get into some more detail with regard to the grains and vegetables. And you'll see that what's going on with my plate is that if you look at the 12.7 for grains, 14 for fruits, and this is by percent, and protein foods are at 8. But what you see across here is that with regard to the RRR, the healthy and nutritious, that only around 27% was in that healthy, nutritious area. 8, a little more than 8, we could not determine. So that put us at about almost 65% were non-nutritious. So in discussing that, what we see is that it's 2 times more frequent on children's programs to have unhealthy food versus healthy food presented. And that it matches up very nicely with the 2009 study I mentioned earlier. In the very beginning, we saw studies at 7 per hour. Now we're seeing up to 16%. And I'm just going to close with talking about the fact that yesterday it was brought up about smoking. Well, historically, we know that might be a good model for TV because with smoking, in 1971, legislation banned smoking from advertising. So the last time smoking was on TV was the Johnny Carson show on January 1st of 1971. But it was still in movies and TV, and it took sort of that continuous concern by society about smoking and the increase of teens, etc., for smoking to eventually leave the motion picture as being rated higher. It's still in it, but you get an R rating if you have smoking in your movies. And with that, then, TV followed soon after that, even to the point they went back to the old Barbera cartoons like Tom and Jerry and the Flintstones, and they took all the smoking out. So in closing, I think we got time maybe for a question. Thank you.
Steve Blair, South Carolina. On your last point, do you think the evidence that the foods that are advertised on TV are as harmful to health as smoking is to health?
Well, again, I did not do advertising. I did TV programming. Are we referencing TV programming?
I'm sorry, I meant programming.
Okay.
So are these foods do we have the evidence that they are as harmful to health as smoking is?
No, that is an area we still need more research to know how influential, what is the effect from these non-nutritious food in TV programming. We've done the first step to identify that they're definitely there and at a very high rate compared to healthy foods, but what we don't have is evidence-based research that says what effect it's had. Next, that'd be a good research question for students in here, right? Yeah.
Good morning. Excellent presentation. I'm Rebecca Kelly, University of Alabama. I have 2 tweens. I'm finding that they're spending less and less time watching television, but yet still doing gaming and Netflix and other things. What do you think is the future around advertisements moving away from TV programming? For example, Procter & Gamble is no longer having their commercials run with soap operas. They've moved into social media. So love your thoughts about the future of where we're going to see some of this advertisement.
Well, again, that's sort of off what my topic is, but I used to actually do marketing and do advertising. And there is a lot of consumer pressure. So I think all companies sort of have to make a decision based on their mission of what they really want to represent to society. And I think some companies will move to take seriously the effect they might have by showing more non-nutritious food than nutritious food, and other companies may be slower to come by. At the end, marketing is very consumer driven. So we have the ability through the way we purchase foods to make a difference of whether a commercial is effective in the use of the type of foods they put in it. So don't ever forget the power of our pocketbook to be able to affect advertising. Yeah. And my last comment on TV programming, because you mentioned tweens, is the fact that even these old shows never go away today. It's like we tell students in class, don't put anything on Facebook, it's there for life. Well, obviously, a lot of things are there for life, including TV programs. Yeah. Thank you.